her background is nerd.
Darren should have gone to school here instead of Cutter, because you are a devil. I can tell you that right now.
She rolls in like she's a Hollywood movie star now. She just she's just here for the camera.
I guess I tooted.
No hard-hitting questions here.
Yeah, Shall we talk about my one-sentence resignation?
Well, we're very excited this morning for the next episode of Spilling the Tea in Studio D. Very fortunate this morning. And Candace and I were talking on the way over. I mean, this may be the biggest podcast for our little dog and pony show to date, right?
Yes. It's not every day you get to come to the zoo and podcast.
Yeah, I know. I feel like most days working with you is like working at the zoo in lots of ways.
Occasionally. Ditto. Right back at you.
Yeah. So anyway, enough about us, as we often get sidetracked and want to talk about us. Thanks for the invitation to come over and talk with the zoo. And if I tell you what, we'll just roll it like this. How about you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, background-wise, how you got to be where you are today. How about that?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us at the zoo today. It's a little bit overcast, but per Arkansas, welcome to Arkansas. My name is Jessica Deavult. I'm the Conservation Education Manager here at the Little Rock Zoo, and I've been in the zoo industry for over 12 years now.
Wow.
I started my career as a teenager in Mesa, Arizona. Most people don't know where Mesa is. If you know where Phoenix is, just east of that. And I grew up the typical kid who really loved animals. I was very passionate about digging for roly-poly insects in my Oma's backyard in her rose bed. And I was like, what can I do with this? How can I harness this passion and care for wildlife and turn it into a career? And I was very fortunate that my sister had one of her friends in her Girl Scout troop that was currently volunteering at the Phoenix Zoo. So that's my hometown zoo.
Yeah.
And I learned about their teen program. And so I applied and got accepted to their teen program and spent about 3 years developing my skills as an interpreter, getting to learn about the AZA zoo industry because being accredited is a big deal.
Sure, right.
And I just fell in love, and I kind of sidetracked some of the normal opportunities of talking with guests first. That's where I got my animal husbandry experience.
Right.
I worked on the Harmony Farm for a little bit. And then I moved up to working with equine with horses in their horse hands class. And then I made my way all the way up to the animal care center. And so I got a really nice background in what it means to care for animals in an accredited zoo. And from there, I made my way into zoo education and into conservation education. So I started, as many do, in seasonal roles. So I was a camp counselor for many years. Dipped my toes in overnight programming. If you have ever been at a zoo at nighttime, it is my favorite time to be in a zoo.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And especially in Arizona, we had a really well-developed overnight program. We had indoor sleeping locations, outdoor sleeping locations, and being able to connect to the local environment and be able to teach that way with students and families was really rewarding. So everything got my start in Phoenix, took a leap of faith after I graduated college. I studied conservation biology and ecology at Arizona State University with a minor in sustainability, and I went to New York. So I moved to all the way across the country, and I was at the Bronx Zoo under the Wildlife Conservation Society for a while. Yeah, so
that's so
took a leap of faith, was there for a while, was at the Houston Zoo after that. That was my largest tenure at a zoo before coming here, and I made my way to Little Rock.
And then you wound up in Arkansas, huh?
Yeah.
Yes, so I definitely found my way into zoo education and fell in love and haven't left.
So what pulled you to Little Rock? Was it the fact that they had an education position open, or, why Little Rock?
Sure. So that is something in the zoo field that moving around is pretty common to be able to gain more experience, move into the types of roles you're interested in. So the position was open, And I was ready for the next step in my career, and they were looking for someone to help manage the education team, really rebuild it, because they had a number of staff members who had moved on to other opportunities.
Right.
And the zoo is in such a prime position right now. We're about to celebrate our centennial.
Wow.
We have big bond projects going on. So it checked a lot of professional boxes for me in terms of growing my skill set, knowing the things that I've done in my career. I could bring that to Little Rock and help out our zoo here. And I absolutely have loved it for the about 2.5 years I've been here.
That's awesome.
On a personal level, I love the natural state,
Right.
Especially spending so much time in Houston. It takes a really long time to get anywhere.
Sure.
And it's beautiful there. But here in Arkansas, being able to pretty much take 15 to 20 minutes to get around across the city, that's huge. And nature is so close. The hiking, the kayaking.
All the parks.
Yeah, I'm a scuba diver, so unfortunately I moved further away from the coast. But we have other access to rivers, and I rock climb, so there's a lot here for me personally in addition to the career opportunities.
I was just thinking on the way over, I'm like, I'm 50, and I remember coming to the zoo as a kid. I brought my daughter to the zoo as a kid. Like, you know, I've been on field trips, you know, with schools.
Yeah. Right.
It's just pretty awesome, actually.
So before we get too deep into other things, this is just kind of a human interest question on my part, but how many employees actually work at the zoo? I mean, it's real easy for us to walk in and enjoy the zoo, but I know there's got to be just tons of people behind the scenes.
We do, and it does fluctuate seasonally.
Right.
So that is something that, you know, we can have, I think it's somewhere to 70 or 80 staff typically on the books, but it can fluctuate, especially over the summer or during event season, to over 100 employees, because we are partnered with SSA Group, who runs our gift shop and our cafe now. I hire seasonal camp guides to help with our Zoofari camp program, so we definitely see that seasonal fluctuation of our staff.
Okay.
It's a pretty big team, though.
Oh, yeah. And like I say, it's really and truly, you do a great job, obviously, because it's seamless once you get in here, right? I mean, everybody's thinking, you know, I guess it just all magically happens, but I know there's a lot of work on the backside.
What's the coolest job that you think is here?
That's a hard question, depending on who you talk to. And I've been in zoos for so long. I think they're the unsung heroes of the zoo world, but I really think facilities teams.
Oh, yeah.
They're incredible because their day is never the same.
Right.
The work that they do literally is impacting whether or not animal care staff can do their jobs. Right. And then they're also involved in having to fabricate new exhibits. So we have a new exhibit coming with Toad Suck Days. They're helping to create a new amphibian and reptile exhibit with us.
Okay.
So we have an individual on our team, David Odell. Shout out to him. He's creating the facade for all of that. So in addition to the maintenance orders, you're helping to create exhibitry. And then we have an incredible leader of that team, Tony Dawson, who is helping to design what exhibits are going to look like with our assistant director and our contractors we're working with. So I think that team is typically just not considered enough, and they have an incredible amount of skill to do what they do. And there's so much variety.
And I can probably equate it on a little bit of a small scale, you know, in high school working at the theme park there in Hot Springs. But, you know, like you're saying, there's so much that goes on the off hours and behind the scenes. But when it's go time, the gates open, right? I mean, this is such a public facing type career.
Yes.
And so again, I'm like Candace. I've been here a bazillion times as a kid, parent, you know, school, whatever. But you always walk away with a very positive attitude, and I think that speaks highly to you know, to the staff, and they're, I guess the best way to say it be welcomeness. I don't know what the word would be, but they're very welcoming when they get here. So do a great job with that for sure.
Thank you. We're definitely trying to make sure that everyone feels like they belong at the zoo, and we do have some newer initiatives that we've done over the past year. It's called a Zoo for All initiative. So we have a couple of different prongs to that. So you may be familiar with our Highland Dairy Dollar Day. Got to say that correctly. That typically happens over the summer. But we were really reflecting as a leadership team of what do we do to make sure that what we do at the zoo is welcoming everyone in the community, and how do we also address some of the access issues. So we have added some community days as part of our Zoo for All initiative, and then we also have a new SNAP beneficiary program. So the community days are focused on celebrating and really acknowledging the Little Rock residents. Like, we would not be here without them. And as we go into our centennial 100 years, that's amazing.
Awesome.
And then our Zoo for All SNAP beneficiary program, anyone who benefits from the SNAP program, they can get a deeply discounted access to the zoo.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're definitely working to try to make access easier, and then we have some other initiatives around language inclusion and things like that, because we're really trying to be seen as a member of the community of Little Rock, not just a resource that people see usually when their kids on field trips.
Sure.
So
So
field trips.
Yeah.
How many? We saw Bryant, one of our school districts coming in. How many field trips do you guys?
Oh my gosh, putting me on the spot. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we easily during springtime season can have hundreds of kids here at a time. The area we're in right now, next to the overflow parking lot, that is just packed with buses, so we could have 10 groups here at a time. It's really incredible, and it's really beneficial and rewarding to the education team. So I have a team of educators that a big part of their job is to be out facilitating, engaging with the public on a daily basis. It's not just paid programming or outreach. It's really helping to make sure anyone who comes through the door has that welcoming face, can ask questions, get the insider scoop on what's happening in the zoo, because you're not always going to get that on signage. And we have school groups that come back multiple times, or families that come and make really special connections, not only with the educators, but we have a phenomenal animal care staff. The keepers are really passionate about sharing their stories with the public. And so we have families that will ask about individual keepers, like, are they here today? To be able to say hello, because they take the time to tell those stories and be present.
Cool.
Well, I think probably the neatest thing about that is how, the springtime is popular, but I think they learn about these animals, the habitats, that kind of stuff, and then the big finish is with a field trip to the zoo, get to see the animals in action, if you will. Speaking of animals, so top to bottom, how many do you all have? Roughly.
So it's in the 200s. It's always kind of in the different species, not individuals. It gets a little tricky when you start talking about some of the smaller species, like invertebrates. Do you count the feeder insects? Things like that, the small frogs, where we've actually been really successful with some of our amphibian collection with those. So it's like, it's breeding season, and then how many individuals do we have?
I gotcha.
So we have a lot of individuals, but I know the different species is typically kind of in that 200.
Okay.
That's quite a few. That's good.
Yeah. So what would you say? What's the most unique, if you will, animal or species at this particular zoo?
Okay. Unique is hard when you ask zoo people, because unique can mean rare. So what's one of the more rare species we have? What animal has some of the best features? I would say probably some of our critters in the reptile house.
I avoid the reptile house.
Oh, I love it. It's such
I
a
do not.
special
I'm
place.
terrified of snakes. So when we found out we were doing the podcast, I said, if somebody brings a snake in here, I cannot hold the snake. And Darren's scared of them too. So of course then we come in and Katie puts a big snake.
Yeah,
on the
I
table.
appreciate that. So that's actually one of the things that we do, and we just recently celebrated Reptile Awareness Day. But with snakes in particular, local reptiles, that's a big part of our programming and our messaging, because they play such an important role in the environment. And most of the time we run into them, they're just as surprised as we are. And they typically want to get away from us. But I would say in the reptile house, we have some really special individuals in there. We have a new Komodo dragon. So when we talk about unique, I think that's maybe what has a lot of the draw right now. Iro, he's a juvenile. juvenile. Maybe if we head out into the zoo, we'll get a chance to look
Okay.
at him. He's a juvenile. We are working on a brand new Komodo dragon exhibit on the one side of the reptile house, and he's just very animated, and he enjoys going all over his enclosure. He'll come right up to the glass to engage with people. So I think he's pretty special.
So how big can a Komodo dragon get?
So Komodo dragons can get up to 5 feet.
Wow.
Yeah, they're quite large, and they're an example of what we call island gigantism. So that's when species that live on islands are oftentimes able to grow to a larger size because they either have better access to resources or limited competition or things like that. So Komodo dragons are quite large. It's called Island of Komodo, Island of Giants, because they've done a really good job with the indigenous community that lives there, recognizing that ecotourism can be helpful, but doing it in a respectful way. I mean, homes are kind of built up so they don't have to worry about as much conflict. These are massive lizards that have really unique hunting tendencies. It's kind of like if you think about here in the U.S. how people maybe regard American alligators, having to coexist with a really large reptile can be challenging. Or even in Florida when you think about some of the challenges with introduced species like the Burmese pythons and the things in the Everglades that we're combating. But they can get quite large and quite heavy.
Well, so and this is one thing that's always kind of interested me is the fact that, I mean, Arkansas weather is, I don't understand that, I guess, on some of these animals. How do y'all make sure that they're able to adapt to the heat and the humidity, one extreme, and then to the bitter cold on the other?
That's a great question, and it's something that we have to strategically plan for in our collection plans. So collection plans have lots of facets of, how are we tying into our conservation work, what stories we tell, but a big part of it is where are we located? So here in Arkansas, we wouldn't have certain species of animals because it gets so hot, and the infrastructure we would need to maintain those animals comfortably and not just surviving, right? It's about thriving. These animals are in our care. We want them to have a good life. So it's about making sure that they're set up for success. The reptile house, for example, with all of the desert, tropical, the wide variety of species we have in there, our animal care staff have to be an expert in providing the proper lighting, the proper heating, the proper humidity. So making sure we're using all of the things we can to make that work. And then seasonally, people may come in winter here and they might not see some of the animals in the outdoor enclosures where they normally would in the springtime, and that's because they're going to spend more time indoors. So it's about making sure we have adequate, if there's outdoor and indoor housing, making sure that those are created in a way that even if it's for a couple months at a time, they're set up for success. We also use our enrichment program to be able to make sure during those times of year where an animal might be used to more heat, so they're spending more time inside, how do we make sure that they're enjoying their time, they're still getting the stimulus they need, being able to forage for their food or interact in a certain way. So enrichment programs are really big, and enrichment is how do we help them practice or provide the environment for them to practice those natural behaviors, the things that they would normally do if they lived out in the wild.
Well, and I guess something else too is, as far as attainment or procurement of a species, how do y'all go about that? I mean, as far as like, okay, we want to start an exhibit on X. I mean, who makes that decision and what goes into that process?
Sure. So we are an AZA accredited zoo. I've mentioned that before. It's basically an accreditation body, which means we have to have high standards for animal care, conservation, research, education, all these things that we have to redo every 5 years to stay accredited. And as part of that, we are part of a large network of individuals. We have stud books, we have SSP planning groups. SSPs are species survival plans. So animals that for some reason, are endangered or threatened, and we want to have captive breeding
Right.
populations.
Right.
Population management is a big part of what we do. There are individuals that it's their job to look at the genetics of
Wow.
individuals and say, okay, is this a good pairing for breeding? But then you might have to figure out, how am I going to place an animal as well? And so a big part of that is seeing what do facilities have in their setup, who can take an individual.
Right.
Are we building new exhibits? Do we have aging individuals? And for a facility like ours, we have some tiger girls that are growing up. When that breeding recommendation came through, one thing we have to be mindful of is, do we have the space to take care of the individuals for a certain period of time?
Yeah.
And every species is a little bit different,
Right,
but
sure.
eventually you'll be sending individuals out, individuals may be coming in, and that's a big part of it too, is when we have births at a zoo, oftentimes people get really attached to them.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, this animal is going somewhere else. Well, it's
Sure.
nice. You can still connect and extend that
Right.
journey to another facility, and then continue that bond and kind of learn from another facility too. But there literally are people that manage all of the individuals in AZA zoos and aquariums, and there's conversations about
Right.
moving animals in and out. Here at our zoo, it's our curators, our assistant director, who's also our general curator, having those conversations, making sure we're set up for animals to come in, come out. Just like we have the new exhibits that we're planning for, you have to really back those timelines up and figure out, when do animals need to come into quarantine,
Right.
because we need to make sure they're healthy and good to go before we potentially mix them in with other animals or have them out with the public. It's a big job.
And the attachment piece, and again, this will air down the road a little bit, but obviously, most recently, it was Josie the big elephant, correct?
Sophie.
Sophie. Okay, I knew I'd messed that up. But anyway, being attached to an animal that's been here. How long was she here at the zoo?
She had been here a very long time, and we developed a strategy as a zoo. A lot of people maybe didn't initially realize that she had been under hospice for a number of years. She
Right.
was under hospice for about 7 years before we really started shifting the conversation to include the public of Sophie's been in hospice,
Right.
helping people relate to what does that mean for like a human to go through hospice,
Sure.
and be able to understand that process as we knew we were getting closer to the end of her life. And it was incredible just getting to hear the outpouring of support and love and remembrance on Monday. That was definitely a tough time for our staff.
And I think too, it's important, even from an education standpoint, is that is the circle of life.
Yeah.
And
I had no idea that elephants live that long. I mean, you just don't think of life expectancy of an animal. You just try to. I mean, that's pretty awesome. 50s.
Yeah. So they can live into their 60s.
Wow.
It's just all about really good care. And oftentimes animals that are living in zoos or aquariums, oftentimes their life expectancy can be longer because you have better access to health care and the food you need, and a lack of predators, right?
Right.
But then what we also see is, because they're living such long, healthy lives, the same thing that we go through as people, as you start getting the ailments or the things that naturally come with age, that then we have to evolve our story and help bring the public along who might be following individual animals and let them know, well, this is what's going on with this individual, and how do we prepare everyone for that, because we do know that people are very attached to the animals we have here at the zoo. And it's understandable.
Oh, yeah. Lots of life lessons to be
Yes.
had, I think,
Yes,
when you go
absolutely.
through that. So, that being said, I mean, is the plan going forward to find, I mean, do you find a replacement? I mean, I'm sure it's down the road, those kinds of decisions. I mean, is there ever a number of a species that you guys work with, or is it just kind of depend on the situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is species specific. I'm glad you mentioned that. So there are some animals that people will come to the zoo and they'll be like, why is that animal by itself? It must be so lonely, because we as humans are very social creatures. And so animals like jaguars, tigers, they're meant to be alone. They'll come together for breeding, for things like that. We do have, on the flip side of that, though, when you have animals that have social structures, social hierarchies, usually there are some parameters on how many individuals you need to have. And especially as elephant care has evolved, working very closely with our AZA cohorts, we have a lot of criteria too to house elephants. That is something that anytime you have large losses, and especially when you have things like population of your individuals that you have to take into consideration, that may mean down the road, like, what is the plan for the zoo? You know, do you move into a different species? You know, if a zoo or aquarium loses a major individual, you may have seen this in the past where, like, an institution may have lost, like, their final polar bear. You know, and then it's like, okay, well, maybe we're shifting out of that. I don't know currently what the plan is for our zoo, but that's definitely something that what we're focused on right now is not only the care and well-being of the people that are impacted by this, but also focusing on Zina and Babe, making sure that they're having what they need to grieve and kind of move through this process. When we think about kind of how we process and our emotions, oftentimes we anthropomorphize what animals go through, we put our feelings on them, but we do know that elephants are incredibly intelligent, and it is felt when there is a loss of an individual. You've probably seen those nature documentaries of you know, entire herds mourning the loss of an individual. So right now it's all about focusing some of that energy inward and making sure that the animal care staff is cared for, the individual elephants continue to be cared for, but that extra thought of, we've had a loss to the herd, what does that mean? Oh,
I know. You don't think about it. Like my dad, he's a farmer and has cattle, and I'd gone my whole life, and I said I could have gone my whole life without knowing this, but you know, like, he'll take the calves to sale or whatever, and he said, yeah, you know, the moms, they'll bawl for their babies for like 2 to 3 days, and my daughter and I went, what? I mean, like, it was just, you just don't think about nature and the animals or whatever, but he said after 2 or 3 days, it's like they, you know, kind of go through that process, but it was just like devastating. Like, I could have gone forever without that.
And we sometimes see the flip side of that in zoos too, right? There are many animals in the world that parental care is not part of the agenda. You have eggs that are hatched, and no one's going to care for that individual. You probably can think of, you know, sea turtles, for example. The female comes up on the beach, lays the eggs, and then it's the scramble for all of those little babies when they hatch out. Can I get to the ocean? There's some of those innate senses of what to do. So oftentimes we also hear the flip side of that from our guests, of asking, oh, well, are they going to miss the fact that so-and-so isn't here? Well, it depends on the situation. Because even, you know, for example, in our tigers, when basically the parents went on to new facilities, that was the recommendation from the tiger SSP and that group of, we really want to make sure that these two individuals, which were healthy, can still contribute to saving their species. It was a good time for them, because the girls were growing up. We even have where one of our girls is spending more time by herself, because naturally in the wild they're going to learn from mom, which usually the male tigers aren't in the picture for raising the young. And then over a period of time, they're going to learn the skills they need and eventually go off on their own. So it's just like when we maybe grow up and are moving out or going to our jobs, and all of those life stages, animal stages look a little bit different. It's very cool.
So you know, and again, that's something I hadn't thought about, but you know, like you're saying, I mean, you've obviously you've got to be on your toes with so many different species, and like you're saying, just knowing what's needed, and having the staff to be able to take care of those. So as far as animal care, how is that broken down as far as teams to take care of the different again, I go back to species, but how is that broken down? I mean, do you have somebody that deals, or a team that deals with primates, and then some that deal with, like you're saying, the big cats or what have you?
Sure. So at our zoo, we do have teams that are a little bit more structured like that. So we have a curator of hoofstock. We have a curator of ambassador animals and reptiles, curator of what have I left out? Big cats, there we go, and primates. So we do have curators at our zoo that are structured in that way. However, you've probably noticed too that more and more zoos and aquariums are shifting to multi-species habitats.
Right.
So the ability to care for individuals that might not be that primary animal group is also more prevalent. We also have within some of those teams having to go to different areas of the zoo to be able to care for those animals. So it's not just, oh, my grouping of animals is right here. I have to go take care of the wildebeest and the zebra and the individuals over here. I've got the rhino here, and then I've got, some other animals on the other side of the zoo. So every group has, or every team rather, has the staff they need to care for those individuals. But then it is definitely that puzzle, right? To make sure that on any given day you're able to have the support you need, because we even have for some of our higher risk animals that you have to work an area with a certain number of people for safety purposes, right? So that all goes into it as well.
So what would be an example of what you just talked about when you have to have multiple people with an animal? What's probably one of the, from a safety standpoint and the number of human folks that work with an animal, what animal would that be here?
Sure. And it also depends on, what activity are you doing?
Sure.
So are you providing husbandry care and you're going out and cleaning the exhibit, or are you doing a training session?
Sure.
Do we have veterinary staff coming down who are going to practice a behavior basically to prep for something, right? So when we do our behind the scenes elephant experiences, we have multiple staff present because we are bringing the public into a behind the scenes area, into the barn.
Gotcha.
And you have someone who's focused on the elephant. We have someone who's more focused on the engagement with the guest. You have another person who's able to help support. So typically you're going to have like 3 people helping with an elephant experience. I think that's the minimum. And then when we talk about big cats, that's an area when we talk about higher risk animals. We have what we call code red animals. Every zoo calls it something different. But that's an animal section that sometimes you have like a double lock system where you need to have a second person as you're shifting animals or making sure you've closed down an area properly.
Yeah. So with all, I guess, everything that you do, I mean, is there a favorite aspect of your job for you?
For me personally, I'm really big on the people. So I am in education. I do have a background in animal care, and it's really about the connections with the people, whether it's offsite in the community at an outreach program, doing a career chat. We just most recently had some university students or technical college students coming in, and we did a career panel with our conservation coordinator. She's also our research coordinator, our head veterinarian, and one of our reptile keepers, because these students are early in their career trying to figure out, most people just think about, oh, I can be a veterinarian, or I can be a keeper, and that's it. And having an opportunity to lead a tour with these individuals and then be able to talk about and create exposure to our field, and also debunk some of those myths, right? Or help provide answers or create more questions, because sometimes people don't know what to ask or what to know. And I think I am fulfilled at this point in my career by also helping my staff grow and achieve their goals. So we work from early childhood all the way up. It's a spectrum of learning. And so how can we create those opportunities to have connection and have everyone feel welcome at the zoo, from our events that we host to those early connections to nature? We know that we can't ask people to protect the environment or change their behavior if they don't have buy-in, if they're not connected, if they don't have empathy for animals. And that's pretty much what my job is about now, is making sure that the staff are empowered with the stories and information and have those aha moments with our guests, being able to make their day a little bit better, and have them wanting to come back to the zoo or leaving with a desire to dig more into something they care about, or to change a behavior or explore something new.
Now, will you guys go into the schools? I mean, we know the schools bring kids, which is awesome, because kids that never have an opportunity to go anywhere are able to come and see the zoo. But do you guys go into the schools?
We do.
Okay.
And the zoo's been doing that for a long time, and we have different kind of evolutions to what those programs look like. Right now, we're really focused on our community partnership program. So we're collaborating with East Initiative with a really fun program called Project Zoo, where students who are developing their STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, math, how do we apply that to the zoo world?
Right.
And so students are creating proposals on how to solve a zoo challenge by applying those skills. And so throughout the entire school year, it's a relationship-based program, right? They're developing proposals. We just finished interviews. So we had like 58 applications this year for projects, and we had about 22 project topics available. So the groups that we select to move forward, they're going to be working with education staff, zoo staff to develop these projects that will benefit the animals and the people in the zoo. How cool is that to be? It's all the way down to elementary school. So how cool is that to be in elementary school, high school, to be able to say, I learned a skill and it benefited the Little Rock Zoo. It benefited my hometown zoo. That's really neat.
It really is. Well, and I think that exposure piece is very important, obviously. And I think, the younger we can expose them, because, most kids, I would say, have a love for animals, right? And I want to be a vet. But without knowing what else is available, I mean, they're kind of
spark their interest.
Exactly.
Different things.
Well, and it's all about too, even if you love animals but you don't see yourself doing the animal care piece, there is a job for you where you can help wildlife. So whether you're really good with money or you're interested in construction or engineering, there's a job that you can have that can benefit wildlife, that can benefit animals. And that's a big part of the story that we tell, is helping individuals who are like, oh, I really don't like the idea of dealing with all of the seasons and going out and cleaning out stalls, because that's what animal care staff do a lot of.
Absolutely.
You're cleaning up the poop, you're scrubbing the penguin pool, all of those things. So if that's not the version of what someone can see themselves doing, what else can they do? Because there's just so much out there. And another aspect of the outreach programming we do, we obviously do a lot of community events, but when we do go to schools, we are honing in on, how can we connect people back to our local wildlife? Because here at the zoo, we do have a lot of animals that are found elsewhere in the world, but then how do we help people develop the skills and knowledge to be able to coexist with the species we have here?
Like
snakes.
I knew it. Exactly. I knew it. We were coming with snakes.
Just like snakes.
I knew it.
Full circle of snakes.
So if one of our schools are interested, I mean, do they go through your department to set up a field trip, or have you all come out to their school? Is that all funneled through the education office, I guess?
So programs are funneled through the education office. Field trips are booked through our guest services team, and we work very closely with that team to be able to, if someone says, oh, I'm going to book, a field trip, is there an opportunity to add on an educational tour or something like that? That'll get funneled over to us, and we'll be able to decide, what our availability looks like to do that. So we have a pretty straightforward process for outreach, though. We have everything on our website under the Learns tab.
Well, and I guess my next natural question would be, let's just say, hey, we just finished a unit on reptiles. We want to do a field trip, but we also want to tie that in. Is that something that's possible?
Yes, absolutely. With our field trips, you're typically able, with the tours we do as an add-on, you can typically go to 2 or 3 areas of the zoo.
Oh, wow.
And the reptile house is a very popular one, because you can see a lot of species. There's a lot of different ways based on the age of the kids coming or the students coming that we can engage in that space. Absolutely.
Okay. So now we're just going to get into couple of lighthearted questions. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what do you think you would be doing?
Ooh. Well, I love gardening, so I would either probably be doing something with that. or traveling the world and figuring out how to make a job out of that.
Yeah. Well, I almost ask you what a typical day would be like for you, but there's probably no such thing, right? Every day is a new day.
Yeah. That's something that if you come into this field, whether you're in education or you're an animal care staff member or facilities like we just talked about, no 2 days look the same.
Right.
There are seasons in a zoo, so we do have busy field trip seasons. We have, a booming spring, but then we also have big planning periods.
Right.
So we're coming into winter where we know here in Arkansas, that's going to be a little bit slower time for us, but that's where my team is buckling down and prepping all of our programs for next year. So by the time the good weather rolls around, we're spending more time out in the zoo.
Okay. Yeah.
My job, though, I am in a lot of meetings, doing a lot of the planning, managing a team, being off-site in the community.
Right. Yeah. So, but with that being said, are there days though you're just like, ugh, I got to get outside and see an animal?
Oh my gosh, yes. That is the one thing that those of us who start creeping into more office time have to remember. We are so fortunate to have the most amazing office to work in, right?
Yeah.
Other than the people who are out there working remotely in the mountains or something somewhere, we're so fortunate. So it's definitely a habit I have of, you know what, if I've been in back-to-back meetings, it's like, I'm going to go take a walk.
Right.
And we're so lucky up here right now where the education office is that I can walk out and I can see some lemurs. I can walk over to penguins, and it's a routine in the education department where we do rounds, we check on things.
Gotcha.
Where our old office was, we had the collared lizard habitat right there, and we were pretty close to the pond and the elephants. We were a little closer to that side of the zoo, so it's definitely really nice to remember I can go see an animal, and if I'm having a hard day, I'm going to come back smiling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's kind of like us when we're having a bad day. We'll go visit a pre-K
See
classroom.
the kids.
Yes.
Go see the kids.
Yes.
And that's not a whole lot unlike herding wild animals at times, pre-K.
That's
I
right.
promise you that.
Yes.
So,
I'll let you say that.
yeah, it's true. Hey, it's herding cats all the way.
Very true.
So, with your experience, all the years you've been in the zoo, I know you've had to have an embarrassing moment with an animal, right? So think quickly, maybe one of the most embarrassing moments with an animal.
Yeah. It actually came pretty quickly, and it was pretty early in my career. I was going to be doing a camp program presentation, and I can't even remember the snake's name anymore. We're going back to snakes.
Always with the snakes.
But snakes have a behavior that they can musk, or sometimes in rare circumstances they'll like go to the bathroom if they're too nervous, or sometimes when they come out on programs, animals choose to go to the bathroom because they're not in their enclosure.
Sure.
And I had this, I think it was like a 4 or 5 foot snake that I was getting ready to handle, and we had like a little kitchenette that I was getting the animal out, and it just chose to musk and go to the bathroom at that point in time. And I was just like, well, that just happened. And it smells really bad. And it was one of those things where it's like, all right, you do not want to be on program today, or something's going on, so this animal is going to get put away. I somehow have to deal with my new smelling uniform and just carry on.
New perfume, huh?
Yeah, that's showbiz, baby.
Another reason not to like it.
Yeah, that's showbiz, baby, right there. Yeah.
I actually don't mind that happened, because, you know, that's kind of a joke in the zoo world too. Like, you'll have keeper staff, or if you've been working outside all day, you'll come in, you'll be like, I'm so sorry, I know I smell like X, Y, or Z, and it's like, I can't even smell it, or you're fine. But that was definitely a tough go early in my career with that snake.
So obviously you love your job, but what do you find probably most fulfilling about what you do?
Getting to wake up every day, come to work, and realize that I get to have a really big impact on our future.
Right.
Because in education, we're building the conservation stewards of the future.
Right.
We're informing people of how they can change their behavior to use, you know, fewer single-use plastics, or being able to learn about recycling, or even change perceptions about zoos, because we are at that kind of time in our social structure that there are a lot of questions from younger generations about, you know, is what zoos are doing good still? And zoos have evolved over time, and we know that, and we have our structures and our thoughts about it, but we have to sometimes remember that our public isn't quite there yet, or we have to catch them up. So recognizing that every single day I have a purpose and an impact I can have, that's just so incredibly rewarding.
So do you have like maybe a bucket list zoo or facility you'd love? I mean, anywhere in the world that you would love to go visit?
Oh, visit. I thought you were going to ask about work.
That too, yeah.
No, I was going to say that's hard because you just, move around with the opportunities. For being able to visit, well, I had the fortune of being able to go to Canada for the AZA conference this year, so I feel pretty fulfilled with that. Honestly, probably Australia Zoo.
Yeah.
Any of the facilities kind of in New Zealand or Australia, and they're just doing incredible things, and someday I'll get there. It's just not right now.
So like when you're hanging with family or whatever, you guys are visiting a zoo, let's just say not Little Rock Zoo, do you find yourself jumping into the educator that you are and start talking about the animals without even being provoked?
Yes. Whether that's at this zoo or we go visit another zoo, the level of expertise obviously changes when you're at another facility, but you'll have friends and family who will ask you questions about things, and you can make educated guesses or infer, or you might know someone who's there. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's innate, that oftentimes when you work at a zoo, part of your travel is also built around visiting other zoos.
Right.
So even when I took a friend's trip to Belize, we made a point to go to the Belize Zoo, which, by the way, phenomenal facility. They're doing incredible work with their local wildlife there. But we were all just geeking out and getting super excited about, oh, this is how they write signage, or, oh, we can see they're doing this for animal care. What are the challenges?
Get some ideas from them.
I mean, are you living it now, or do you have a dream job, a dream zoo? What would that be?
I think right now I am living the dream job. However, I feel like as an educator, I know that that's going to evolve and change over time.
Absolutely.
The role I'm in now, I am so incredibly fortunate to be part of the leadership team here at the zoo. So being able to advocate for the needs of the team, being able to help shape some of the direction we go as an institution. I'm dabbling in new things like interpretive planning, and growing some of my skill sets and being able to lead a team. Like, I'm in such a fortunate position, and I have some of the best colleagues in the world. Right. It's incredible.
So I know you spend a lot of time at the zoo, but it can't be all zoo all the time. So when you're just wanting.
It can sometimes.
You want to do you. What kind of music do you listen to?
Oh, so in my past life, just when I was younger, it seems so long ago, I was a drum major. I played trombone, and I also played cello before that. So I do love jazz. I love classical. I also grew up in Arizona, and I love country music too. So it just depends on, do I need something to get going, or do I just want to turn my TV on to nice background music while I cuddle with my dogs and read a book?
There you go.
What kind of dogs you have?
So I have 3, and they're all super, super different. They're like my children. So I have an Australian Shepherd, Queensland Heeler mix, Lexi. She's the boss. She's very protective of the house. She was also my first dog ever. I have a Lab mix, Sadie, and a Pit mix, Kai.
Gotcha.
And they're all between like 10 and 12 years old.
So are you married?
I am.
Okay, so let me ask that question. So are they in this business, or do they have an understanding what this business takes to be successful? And like you're saying, obviously, I mean, you're young enough, you're going to have opportunities come your way in the part of moving around. Are they doing something that allows you to do that, I guess?
That is a great question, because I think sometimes that's what people don't realize too, is if you're moving around, are you with a partner who's going to go on that journey with you? I'm fortunate enough that I am married to someone not in this field, but who has followed my journey. What we actually did, so I mentioned living all over the U.S., so it's like, well, how do you make that happen? We decided that it was kind of like when a transition time was coming, we're doing this for you, we're doing this for me, kind of finding that balance. And most of the time, zoo and aquarium facilities that I may work at, they're going to be closer to a city. So my husband's a veteran, and he did like executive protection and some other things like that. So he's able to find work in the places that I live, but it's definitely that balance and remembering to check some things at the door when you go home. But then also just have that understanding of, from the time we started dating to now, just hearing kind of the shift in his understanding or what he will talk about is just incredibly rewarding, because it's like you're not going home to teach someone, right? He's not one of my audience members, but to hear that things are, you know, sticking and that he's invested in some way and he shows up to support us.
That's awesome. Cool. So we talk about that a lot. You know, we both now have spouses that work in education, as do we. So some nights you go home, you get to a saturation point. Go, okay, enough business talk.
No shop talk.
No shop
talk. Where were we on our Netflix thing that we're burning through? So
I definitely need those things to turn off the work mode, be able to transition to being at home.
So you mentioned scuba diving. What else do you do when you for fun?
Well, scuba diving is one of those somewhat niche and somewhat expensive hobbies. So when I travel, usually that's tied into some way. But rock climbing, which I haven't been doing a lot of lately, hiking, fishing, just being outside. I'm fortunate enough that I own a home now since moving here, and we have chickens in the back, and we have a garden. So all the outdoor things. Well, we appreciate the invite, having us out. But one more time, if folks want to, school districts, groups of any kind, I guess, want to plan a trip to the zoo, is the website the best way to go about that? The phone number? Yeah, I would definitely start with the website, because all the information they'll need to know about any of our program opportunities, go to thelittlerockzoo.com. Go to the Learn tab. That's where they can find all the resources they need. You're also welcome to email us at the zoo. We do have an ed programs at littlerockzoo.gov. Because we are a government organization, not .org or .com. That's sometimes where we mix it up. But they can shoot us an email, call us. That's totally fine.
Well, we appreciate the hospitality. It's been great.
If we go check out the dragon, I'm going to have to avoid the snakes.
We will carefully pass by the snakes so you can see
exactly. You can.
No snakes.
I bet maybe there's one you could touch. I'm like you though. I wouldn't. I'm not either. I'm not touching a snake.
We can practice.
We'll practice that one. That's about as close to a snake I want to be.
I have touched a snake in real life one time.
On purpose?
Yes.
Wow, that was pretty brave.
I feel like this is a story to dig into.
Yes, so we're not going to talk about it on the podcast.
Okay.
But
come on, you're among friends. So how do you go about touching a snake?
Because my cousin has a pet snake, and we had gone on one of my sister and my cousin and I do football trips. And we stopped and stayed at their house one night, and I was totally freaked out.
And she was like, just touch it.
Yeah, they talked me into it.
Do you know what kind it was? I'm just curious. This is that part of being a zoo.
Absolutely not.
A big one. It was a big one, right?
Yes.
Could you describe it? What it looks like? See,
I might still have a picture on my phone. I might still have a picture on my phone. I can't remember. But it was it was brown. I'm trying to remember it. Yeah, my heart was. I was
about to blow out of your chest.
Yeah, they talked me into just touching it anyway. And then I looked over, and her husband had it crawling on him. I freaked out, and I got up, and anyway, I was like, I can't stay the night here. It was a snake in the house.
You said it was big. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I could definitely be wrong, but I wonder if it was a ball python, because it
might have been. I don't remember. It had pretty designs on it.
Okay.
I'll look for a picture.
We'll look at the photo, but we'll see if
I'll see if I can find the picture on my phone.
Right or wrong.
Well, you guys are doing great work over here, and again, the education part is a huge piece of the zoo, and I know it takes special people to take the time to really to do two things. You're working with animals, and lots of times you're working with young children, and so I mean that's what a balance. It sounds like you've got it under control. So
it's a big balance. You have to be really good at working with different ages, whether it's families or school groups, going out into the community, and then also be really good at learning the zoo information, because it's really easy to feed misinformation if we're not clear in our
Right.
message.
Oh, yeah,
And,
absolutely.
we don't want to confuse anyone. And conserve, learn, care. That's it's at the heart of what we do here at the Little Rock Zoo. And I think thank you for
so the Centennial piece, let's get to that for just a second before we get out of here. So when is that going to go down?
That's a great question. So what we've been telling folks is we're kind of pulling a Disney here, how Disney celebrated for a couple years.
Right.
As we were doing the research for the Centennial, there's kind of a historic story that's told about what were our original animals when we got our start. There's a little bit more ambiguity to that than we thought. So we started this year celebrating the centennial of our Over the Jumps carousel. It's a wonderful installation we have here at the zoo that is unlike almost everything else in the world. It's actually undulating, which makes you feel like you're going over the rolling hills riding the horse. And its centennial was this fall. So we started out our overall centennial celebration with that.
Okay.
We're going to launch some more activities starting in spring break of next year.
Oh, wow.
And then we obviously have all of these wonderful new exhibits that are coming.
Right.
So it's all kind of like wrapped up into this nice package of end of 24 through maybe early 26.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So kind of pulling that
That's
Disney
awesome.
of a couple years.
Right.
Yeah, cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know something else you guys do. I mean, the holidays are coming, but I mean, you guys have a pretty good light.
We do. So we just had Dragon Kingdom head out. So the dragons have flown off to their new location. And we are getting ready for Glow Wild. It is a must-see event.
Right.
We have bigger and brighter installations, and I truly mean that. Some things were like 2 to 3 times the size of what we thought on a couple of them. We're like, this is beautiful. So you've got to come out and see. We have an ocean section, kind of an under the sea section. We have other animals, and then we also have our ode to the Chinese culture with some of those installations in that area. Yeah, definitely come out and see it. It's running mid-November through the very beginning of January. So we actually are very, very close to our previews coming up actually next week.
Awesome. Well, this will go out perfect time.
Yeah, it'll be perfect time. Well, again, thank you very much. We appreciate it. You've been a great guest, so and appreciate the hospitality.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
that will put a wrap on this episode of Spilling the Tea in Studio B. Again, Candace Bennett and
Studio
Aaron
B?
Beckwith.
Studio B or Studio D? Did you just change it to Studio B?
No, again,
my
you must have been whiffing on some elephant poo or something.
I think we're going to have to rewind. I think he said Studio B.
No way.
Yeah.
No, that would never happen. So anyway, you see what I work with? It's like working with animals some days. Every day. You mentioned earlier, every day is a new day. There you go. That's with her. That's how she wakes up.
It keeps it interesting.
Yeah. But again, thank you so much. And again, we will see you next time on Spilling the Tea in Studio D.